Hi everyone. Well, of course, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Jade Helm. I think it's important because, we keep looking at this thing from every possible angle, and I want to say up front here, it's really important for you to understand this. We don't know exactly what's going on. The only people that know that, not even the troops know that, not even the Special Operations Command people on the lower levels, really up through probably the lower field grade officers don't know what's going on. This is the real objective of this thing, or objectives, are really hidden from the operators and the soldiers. They really don't know. Okay, the problem is a lot larger than them, but of course they're the means by which this thing is carried out. I just want to mention a couple of things. The first is, as I said, we really don't know what's going on. I can say definitively that this is a psyop against the American people, no matter whether it's training for a foreign war or for that or some type of domestic operation, picking up dissidents, taking over state legislatures, whatever. There was a Colonel Benson that actually came up with a plan like that in the Army War College. Some of you are probably aware of that. The point is, we don't know, and we need to be prepared. But I want to make the point this way, that no matter what happens, whether a false flag is used, maybe they're going to say that Al-Qaeda or ISIS or some operating cell in the U.S. or many of them are going to do something during the time period of Jade Helm, and then, oh, lo and behold, we're already out ready for this because we have soldiers in the field and a drill, and gee, we need to do this all the time, so we'll always be ready. However they fashion it, let me assure you that the United States is the prize, to take down liberties in the United States. That's a #1 goal, and I hope that you all understand that by now. So regardless of how they orchestrate this, the end game is still going to be the same. Pretend to save the American people and at the same time put them under some type of subjugation. Okay? Take away your bank accounts, change, the economic situation, grab political dissidents. You don't have to be violent and just disagree with the status quo. Whatever. The point is that any number of things can be used. And I hope that you understand that all of these things that we've been talking about as far as, terrorism and the definitions of it, and really the many, many, many definitions now. I think there are more than scores. There are probably hundreds of different definitions now. It's expanded so far that everything, whenever you merely disagree, you're labeled a terrorist. Or not even disagree, you just happen to have a lifestyle they don't like, whatever. So regardless of how it plays out, okay, whether an attack occurs during the drill, which could be a false flag, or whether they're provocateuring an attack, which the drill's just going to be, luckily going on so that they can counter it, or whatever, okay, the end game is still the same. Reduction of liberties, really putting people into slavery. That would be here domestically. Now, you know how I feel about the military and our empire building around the world. This is wrong, as I've said before. It's wrong that we are engaged in these things and causing the murder and mayhem of hundreds of thousands of people, even millions around the world at this point, with all the things we've been doing in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, on and on and on. And now, of course, we're trying to move on Russia and Iran. However you feel about those countries, there are other ways to handle this without this military option. And really, it's not an option. This was the intent all along anyway by the military-industrial complex. The weapons makers, money banks, all of those. So just the bottom line is just be aware. Get prepared. And no matter what comes down the line, stand by your constitutional rights, your God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Stand by those and do not forfeit them. Do not forsake them. Do everything you can to retain those for yourself and for your fellow Americans, indeed, fellow mankind. Okay? Now, I want to show you another thing that I've looked at here, and I want to assure you that even if this is anywhere near the truth about what all this is really about, the Jade Helm exercise, which I doubt, at least not entirely, it is another possibility. And I also want you to know that even with this possibility, it's wrong. It's the wrong thing to do because we would be the aggressors. Let me show you this map. This comes out of Sputnik News in Russia. And I want you to see it because this should have been the map overlay, what we call in the military a map overlay. You use an existing geographical area, topographical area, whatever. And you usually don't call it by the names there. You come up with some other names, and those map overlays go over there and show, intermediate objectives, rallying points, airfields, whatever. Let me show you this map that Sputnik News came up with, and I'll explain it.
Here is the Sputnik News article. Again, Sputnik is the state propaganda arm of the Russian government. And again, the name of the article. Now, here is the map according to the Russian news agency Sputnik. And you can bet that they had the Russian Defense Ministry with some information on this. And the important thing to recognize here are really two things. I think I've already mentioned it. The first is that it's not just the American conservatives that are worried about what they're seeing here. The Russians are too, so they know that it's bad either way. Now, one of my earlier videos, or at least maybe I didn't say it, I think it was in a response to someone, I talked about a map overlay. And this is what I would expect to see, a map overlay. In these map overlays, and there are several of them in an operations plan, then an operations order, that even for exercise purposes, that would take a normal piece of terrain and overlay pretend sites, places, things like that on the normal terrain. And this is what I would expect to see. So the Russians probably have it right. On that map overlay, you would have things like, the objectives and those types of things. Not really any specific information because that would be in the operations order. But at any rate, this is important because this is kind of how the Middle East is laid out. And if we were to go to war in the Middle East, heaven forbid, by the way, I think this is demonic, okay? I just want you to know, I think this is demonic. And I'm going to also include a link down below on some things that some of our founding fathers talked about how dangerous these things are that we're engaged in. But at any rate, this would provide a training ground very large, very similar to the terrain and the distances involved in a major regional war. So you'd have escape and evasion, you'd have, all kinds of operations you could do in something like this. But is it correct to do it in the United States around citizens, endangering them, and getting them used to militarization? This is what you see, as one other commentator said, in third world countries, a banana republic. We've given the military plenty of money, more than enough money, to conduct these operations on military installations. And if they want large distances, well, okay, I can understand that. Back when I was in the Army, we did large movements of troops, convoys from one place to another. One that I recall is from Fort Ord, California, all the way to 29 Palms, which was quite a distance. So I understand these types of things, but it's the manner. I've got to really impress that upon everyone. It's the manner in which the military, the government of the United States, and the Department of Defense and the Special Operations Command foisted this other map that shows Texas as hostile and Utah as hostile on the American people, and the way it was done. So really, they do, I think, obviously consider the American people, at least a number of them, to be opposing their purposes, and they should, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. But at least on this map you can see that the Russians, who I don't normally consider to be a paranoid people, realize that something's going on here. So what am I saying? This is probably a dual purpose mission. As one writer into the site mentioned, it's legal now to conduct psychological operations, propaganda, disinformation on the American people, whether or not it's constitutional or moral. And that was the point in my video. It may be legal, but it's not constitutional, it's not moral. And a free republic, constitutional republic, cannot exist with an electorate that is not informed, correctly informed. And secrecy and deceit destroy liberty. So I wanted to show you this. Go to Sputnik and look at it, and you'll see how they look at it. And again, I want to emphasize, this is a dual purpose mission. It's quite obvious. Yes, they could be preparing for a huge, unjust, unrighteous war in the Middle East and other places, of course, if you've been watching this. But also, it has the second objective of, just like it says, winning the hearts and minds of the people. The military going in and using these same tactics on American people, mayors, city councils, citizens, etc. And it actually says that in some of the other documents. You just have to know what you're reading. Anyway, let me move to this other thing.
Okay, so as you can see here, that's not bad, really. A large area, special operations forces in particular. Well, really any military would have to, practice escape and evasion, land navigation, planning and attacking objectives, whatever, certainly. And over a wide area like that, gee, that sounds really good, doesn't it? To be able to do that, to mimic this type of thing. But there are two problems. The first is we shouldn't be doing this in the first place because we are the aggressors in Eastern Europe and in Southwest Asia. That's just the situation. We're not defending ourselves. We're forcing other people to risk their lives and their well-being to try to stop this takeover of their world by us, by the United States. Okay, so that's wrong. We're not there protecting anybody. We're not exporting democracy. We're causing more murder and mayhem and destabilization and suffering. Okay, so that in itself is wrong. The other aspect of this is that even if that's what they're training for here in the United States, you don't do it by engaging in what they are doing, and that is a psychological operation to get people prepared to accept this constant military presence. This is bad, because then you really don't have any control. Who do you go to if somebody takes you off the street late at night or uses the NDAA to come and pick you up at your house at 3 a.m. in the morning? Where do you go for help? You can't. So you have to keep that in mind, okay? Those are things that are absolutely necessary to consider. The point being, of course, that when your rights are suspended, you have no recourse, okay? The military and the DOD and the feds are denying any plans to institute martial law. Well, do you really think they're going to tell you if that's what they're going to do? They're not going to tell you that. Everything is secret. Remember, everything's in secrecy, and surprise is one of the principles of war, okay? You keep the enemy guessing, and you choose the time and the place. I hope you understand that. So the propaganda, the disinformation, all of that, will play for them on the surprise of how the thing is actually executed. Is everybody in the military bad? No, I'm not saying that. But like I mentioned in Valkyrie, at least I think I mentioned it about Valkyrie, if you remember, the German army or reserve army was fooled there. They didn't know who they were working for. And that happens in real life, okay? And especially when did you read here lately, the Army's going to reduce the military's going to reduce its recruitment standards. Oh my gosh, I mean, first of all, I understand that psyop and understand what they're after there, and that's bad enough. A healthy distrust of the central government is a center plank of a constitutional republic. We don't need to worship our military. We can respect the fact that they're needed, that it's a necessary evil, and appreciate the sacrifices of those who truly sacrifice for our freedoms, our liberty, the lives of our loved ones, etc. But don't be fooled. Just being in the military is not in and of itself honorable. Not if you do dishonorable things.
Hornberger's blog, like I said, the link is below, and he writes an article